listening to the myPET podcast, the show for pet lovers of Australia and around the world.
Hi, you're listening to the myPET podcast. I'm Aria, and as always, I'm joined by our resident vet, Dr. Glenn.
Hello.
How you going?
I'm well.
That's good. Before we get started, this is just general advice. For advice specific to you and your dog's needs, have a chat to your vet.
Sounds good.
But today we're going to be talking about travelling with dogs, riding in cars with dogs.
Riding in cars.
It could be... some dogs love the car and some dogs really don't love the car.
Yep, and everywhere in between. Yep.
Yeah, so it's definitely a spectrum of love for the car.
Correct.
And there's also obviously, safety concerns. There's a lot to consider.
Yep.
And it's something that we, can do a lot of.
Can happen every day, and then sometimes it goes wrong and sometimes it goes really right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do your dogs like the car?
Yes. My old crazy Dalmatian gets really excited when she's in the car because usually it's because she's going to the vet clinic to get blood tests for her latest snake bite. So she finds that very exciting.
What a great event.
And they do go for walks off property sometimes. But they all like the car.
Yeah.
Oh, Stoic, not as much. He's getting better. More happy things happen at the end of car trips now because he gets to come to the office and shoot videos and stuff. So he did have opinions initially, but enough food-based reward treats and stuff made it happier. Yeah.
Sage loves the car because it means he goes to work.
Yeah.
If I say to him we're going to work, he's just like pyong up there.
Yeah.
He loves it, but he doesn't like going in the back of the ute.
Yes.
Yeah. I've only tried that once with him, and he's like, "No, I'm not a farm puppy.
I'm a farm dog. I am a pampered pooch. I am a lap dog."
That's right. So let's get into how to prepare dogs for travel. What things should we do to prepare them to go in the car?
I mean, there's lots of training things you can do to like first introduce puppies and dogs to the cars. I mean, you just want to make it as pleasant experience as possible is the short answer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're preparing to go for a road trip, I mean, certainly if you've got a 10-hour road trip coming, just putting your dog in the car and going for a 10-hour road trip sounds like a really bad idea. So, I mean, certainly preparing them in general by working up to what time frames you're sort of looking at. I mean, right from a trip around the block up to a 1 hour trip where they probably don't need to go to the toilet, and then some dogs don't like going to the toilet unless they're at home. We had a dog that did that, and it took a lot to convince him to actually go to the toilet where it wasn't his home yard.
Yeah.
So just practicing stuff. So practicing how you're going to confine them and what you're going to put in the car. What treats do they like to try and pacify them or give them something to do in the car. And toilet breaks, and right through to if you're travelling for multiple days, well then you've got to take into account food offerings and bedding and where are they going to sleep and all that sort of things. So there's lots of just think about what trip you're undertaking and try and not prepare for it the day before or on the day of the trip. Just do the things you need to do. Yep.
Yeah. If I'm going on a big trip with my dog, I'll have like a bag for me and a bag about the same size for the dogs.
Yep.
With all their stuff in
Absolutely.
it. So you mentioned restraining them. So that's an important safety thing.
Yep.
Is it better to have them in a crate or a harness?
I mean, in my opinion, for most dogs, I mean, a crate makes more sense. But in a lot of circumstances, a crate isn't particularly practical sometimes. It depends on your car, depends on the size of the pet, and depends on the layout of the vehicle as well, and how many animals you're travelling. So, I mean, but definitely, I mean, the guiding rules are not in the front seat as much as people sometimes don't like that. I mean, modern cars with airbags and dogs restrained or otherwise in front seats is a disaster waiting to happen. Pets in your lap, and we never want to think about what bad things could happen, but car accidents happen all the time and airbags discharge, and if your little dog is sitting in your lap, he cops an airbag in the face, and that's not what it's designed for, and there's going to be major issues. And in the front there's the distraction side of things. And again, even not in an accident situation, dogs are very distracting, and if you get caught by the police, you'll probably get fined for it as well, because
Yeah.
it is certainly not legal to have a dog in your lap if you're driving.
No, and the laws about dogs in cars vary from state to state in
Correct.
Australia,
Yeah,
don't they?
depends on the jurisdiction, but I mean, essentially they all need to be restrained,
Yeah.
whether it's in the car or in the back of the ute.
Yeah.
Situation, but I mean, essentially in the vehicle, as in the passenger side of things, you've got harness restraints that are locked into preferably the seatbelt
Yes.
restrainer tag, or crates that if you're travelling in the crate, well, then the crate should be restrained as
Yes.
well, like cargo straps and lockdown as well. So that's the two realistic main options.
And with harnesses, there's certain kinds of harness that are just not suitable.
Correct.
Like there are some that are designed to help dogs with pulling problems,
Yeah.
walking, that are just not.
Yeah, there's restraint harnesses, and then there's walking harnesses. Then some of the restraint harnesses you can walk your dog in,
Yeah.
but some of the walking harnesses you certainly can't restrain your dog in.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are crash tested harnesses that we sell as well. So
Yeah.
if you search for car harness on our website, there's quite a few different options.
Yeah.
There that are available.
And again, that can take some training as well,
Yeah.
just getting them used to having that level of restriction.
Yeah.
And like there's adjustment in the straps and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
I mean, you want them to be able to both stand up and lie down and still be attached. I don't know the answer for it, but I've had my own pets have had that restraint. But I mean, most seat belts, you've either got the little press button on the side of it, or you've got the press button on the top of it, and it's sometimes that they get detached themselves by accidentally stepping on it. So I don't really know the answer for that. But I mean, some of the hammock style bedding, like the cargo mats and that sort of thing in the back of the back seat of cars where the restraints are, a lot of the time the lock-in point's actually sort of down a little hatch, and then your little Velcro thing over the top to try and keep the dogs away from that, I suppose.
Yeah. Collars not for restraining.
Not a good idea, no, because if something happens, you don't want your dog's momentum in a crash situation being stopped by the neck, obviously. Yeah.
And on the back of a ute?
Back of the ute is, possibly not ideal. I mean, certainly restrained at all times, certainly restrained, as in tied to a preferably low tie point, short enough that they can't try and exit the vehicle and get hung up and dragged and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I've seen that. It's horrific.
Yeah, it's not good. But I mean, certainly restrained, but in the back of the ute, and it's not theoretical. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen dogs with eye problems and eye injuries from flying insects and flying dirt and rocks and stuff like that. So I mean, the back of the ute is a pretty common way in Australia to travel pets around, but it's not potentially without risk, but definitely restrained short enough that they're not hanging their heads out the side in the wind. But you've got to think about, what's their shade situation, what's their heat situation, how hot's the floor. There's lots of dog crates and built-in cages on the back of utes and that sort of thing. And again, just being mindful of shade, and it's not so much when you're moving, but when they're stationary. But if you put your hand on the back of a steel-plated ute floor, even when it's been moving, like the hot sun on it, it's bloody hot. You can burn stuff. So just being mindful with all those, but definitely always restrained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think a very common complaint is that dogs get car sick and get nauseous in the car. So what is that about, and what can people do about it?
I mean, it's really common in puppies. It's less common in adult dogs. There's a lot of puppies get car sick, and that's just supposedly their central nervous system balance centre's not fully developed until they're an adult. I think that's probably the case, because you see lots of puppies that get car sick, and far fewer adult dogs get car sick. And then preempting that is, if you're going for a car trip, not having a full stomach on your dog or puppy for that matter. Definitely no feeding an hour before. Realistically, I recommend a couple of hours at least before you're going for a car trip, because doing it on an empty stomach makes more sense than on a full stomach, that's for sure.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean they won't get nauseous, but there's less to throw up, and I think they seem to get less nauseous. Yeah.
And I guess it can be tricky if you're trying to use food rewards to make a positive association with the car, but then that's where you can do that. We could talk about training for hours, but it's where you can do the conditioning and that when the car is stationary or drive around the driveway.
That's right. And if they already get nauseous, or maybe food vegetable isn't the way to do it, like while they're moving.
Yeah.
But realistically, I mean, to me, it's more so about like having a full stomach. So I mean, I've got no troubles with them, having a treat dispenser or a chew toy or a licky Kong, with some peanut paste and that sort of thing to keep them occupied for a road trip.
Yep.
They're not going to get a full stomach doing that.
Yeah. And so is there like some anti-nausea supplements, or prescription medication for more sort of, ongoing?
Yeah, absolutely. If your puppy or dog, has had vomiting episodes or had actual nausea before, and nausea can, obviously if they throw up, that's probably nausea, but, drooling, and then is it anxiety based? Does it induce anxiety? I think certainly. I think there's like a subsection of dogs that as puppies have not nice experiences from being in the car because they get sick and throw up, and that then makes them not want to be in the car.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a bit of
just like,
I
don't like that place, it makes me feel sick.
Yeah, absolutely. Does ginger work for dogs as an anti-nausea? I think it seems to.
Yeah.
I've never given it to my dogs, but I've had clients that swear by it, and ginger's not toxic for dogs. So, a ginger, a couple of ginger cubes or a ginger supplement, I don't think it's going to do any harm. If you want to try that, certainly. If there is an empty stomach, they're less likely to get nauseous than on a full stomach. There is a very effective prescription medication called Serenia that's available in tablet form from your vet that is a very, very effective anti-nausea medication, and pets, particularly if they can have long road trips that have had nausea troubles before, last for about 24 hours. Ironically, you've got to give it with a full stomach, but because it lasts for 24 hours, you can give it the night before, and that's my usual recommendation. So even if you're going for like a multiple day trip, you can give them a tablet the night before and travel the next day, and then when you get there, give them the next tablet with their meal and go from there. And it seems to be effective certainly it's an effective anti-nausea medication, but a lot of dogs, once you stop them from being nauseous for a couple of trips, they seem to improve significantly. So I think it sort of retrains their brain, or maybe it reduces that anxiety that induces nausea a little bit.
Yeah.
It's prescription medication. So you have a discussion with your vet whether they need to see your pet for that prescription medication, or if they're happy to dispense it. It's a very safe medication, but it is still a scripted medication that you'll have to have a conversation, and your dog may need to be examined by the vet for you to get that.
Yeah. So anxiety is definitely a big one at play here.
Absolutely.
And like you say, one of the symptoms of that can be vomiting and nausea. So other than training, which I think we'll end up doing a whole other video on, we can obviously touch on it briefly, but what sort of things can we do to help to reduce that anxiety?
So again, not touching too heavily on training, but obviously getting them used to getting in the vehicle and feeding them like their meals in the back of the vehicle before it goes anywhere, and just getting them more happy with being in the vehicle, certainly. Making them more comfortable in their circumstances. You can use things like, thunder shirts certainly aren't just for dogs with storm anxieties. Like it's a non-specific anxiety aid where you put a little compression vest on and gives them a hug and releases serotonin, and they feel better about their circumstance. So that's certainly suitable for travelling. Things like Adaptil, which is the dog appeasing pheromone. So they're either collars or sprays. The plug-in adapter's not going to work in your car probably, unless you get a 240 volt outlet. But the collars and the spray, environmental spray, like inside the crate or in the back cargo area where your dog's travelling, that can make them feel more comfortable in that environment, certainly. And the Zilkine, which is a dietary supplement that is a treatment for mild to moderate anxiety. You can start that a couple of days before your road trip and have that in the system, and it has a calming effect without having a sedative effect for them. And vets used to give out the little yellow tablets, acepromazine tablets, which is a sedative. It is a tranquilizer, which used to get used a lot for car travel and plane travel and that sort of thing. We've really gone a long way away from that now. Like there are other prescription anti-anxiety medications that you can use, that the old acepromazine tablets used to half bomb them out and make them wobbly. So that used to induce potentially more anxiety because they couldn't balance themselves, but it wasn't actually anti-anxiety, and it used to make them actually more anxious. Their body couldn't respond to it. So, but there are prescription anxiety medications that if you haven't got enough activity from, the Thundershirt and the Zilkine and the Adaptor, which are very effective in a lot of cases, consult your vet and see if there's other options if you've got a really problem traveller. And again, it doesn't mean that they're going to need that for the rest of their life if they're a pet that needs to travel a lot. But usually, if you can give them a couple of happy experiences, they improve.
We actually have a whole podcast about anxiety in general. So if your dog's anxious about travelling, that one would probably be good to listen to because, anxiety can be... I'm willing to bet that if a dog's really anxious about travel, they're probably anxious about other stuff.
Pretty fair chance.
Like, I'm terrified of flying. Like, the last time I had to fly overseas, as the plane was taxiing out, they taxied back in to let me off because we do not want this crazy person on our plane. But I had some happy experiences, and I'm pretty good now.
Very good.
But I'm also anxious about lots of stuff. So
I don't know how you got around that, but don't give your dogs vodka for travel.
No, and also I don't think trying Zilkine for your own travel phobias is probably...
I'm not going to recommend it. There is a product in Europe that has got the same active constituents in it for people.
Really?
But I'm not advising you to take Zilkine.
No.
Yes.
No, that's interesting though. But yes, anyway, we're not talking about travel phobias for humans, but I very much empathise with dogs who are worried about travel because I've been there myself.
Yeah, and it's like most things, if you have a bad experience, pretty fair chance you can have a poorer opinion about that same thing the next time, but if you can have good experiences, usually that opinion gets better.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And like I know from my own experience that some really nice in-flight food did absolutely help to condition me to think that flying was nice.
Food can help.
So during the trip, what are some tips to make that trip more comfortable for everybody?
On the food front, certainly you can have treat-based things and chewy things, like a bit of a chewy experience for dogs to help them out, whether that's, pig's ears and that sort of things. I'm not a big fan of highly processed rawhide chews and that sort of thing, and probably taking a big meaty bone isn't a great idea in the back of the car. But, things like Kongs with frozen stuff in them, or, peanut paste, or... stuffing of some sort, that makes sense.
And if you have one of those big hammock things, they're so easy to clean that you can, don't have to worry so much about the messiness.
So in those or in the crate situation, that definitely makes sense. Regular stops for pee breaks and water breaks definitely make sense. And again, a trip up to an hour, your pet probably doesn't need a pee break, but if it's an hour or two, it's probably a good idea to offer them a pee break and a drink.
And a stretch of the legs. Sniff the local surroundings.
Yep, absolutely. If you're preparing for a trip, I think probably exercising your dog well the day before makes sense. So, if they're not going to get much exercise that day, get them a bit more tired potentially, and do an exercise walk within their usual capacity sort of thing the day before makes sense.
Yep.
But yes, if you're doing a 3 or 4 hour trip, they're going to need to have a reasonable stretch of their legs. That probably doesn't mean letting them off lead in an unfamiliar environment, because there's all sorts of new things, vehicle noises or strange things that could scare them when they're usually fine and they really like you and stay close. I wouldn't recommend that. So an extension lead or a long line makes sense to get a bit more exercise in their legs so they can stretch their legs. One thing to remember if you're travelling with puppies that aren't fully vaccinated yet, and that could be going to get your puppy and bring it home, and sometimes people go for long distances to get puppies, or if you're travelling around the time of up until that a week after their last puppy vaccination, which is probably going to be at 16 to 18 weeks of age, they're not fully immune for parvovirus, which is the main one that we're worried about, and it's a poop transferred viral infection. So if you're stopping beside the servo where everyone else stops with their dogs, that's not a great spot to let your puppy have a toilet break. So it's
Yeah.
probably find a more secluded area away from, suburbia or away from where other dogs are likely to have been.
Yeah.
Or you could go to the extent of take a puppy pad and like a fake toilet spot for the puppy, which may or may not work depending on what they've been trained for. But certainly, trying to find an isolated, very low dog population area if you're going to let them touch the ground to go to the toilet, I would definitely advise that, because every dog's pooped next to the servo on a long trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the note of pooping, I have two things in the back pocket of my car seat at all times: a collapsible water bowl and a roll of poopy bags.
Yep.
Don't get caught without them.
Yep. And if you are pooping in the woods in an isolated spot, still please be a good citizen and pick it up.
Yeah.
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 No one wants to find dog poo.
No.
If you're changing diets with your dog, it's probably best to do that before travel as well, to prevent some car messes.
Yes. Absolutely. So, I mean, depending on what your normal diet is for your dog, I mean, my dogs are on a raw food-based diet most of the time, so travelling with a raw food-based diet doesn't make things very easy sometimes.
No.
I mean, there are options like Balanced Life and dehydrated raw foods, but any diet change, if you're going to say change your diet, do something else for the trip, yes, I would do that, in the week leading up to the car trip. So if it's a multi-day excursion, that you're not going to get dietary upset troubles on the second day because of what we ate the night before.
Yeah.
So just changing their diet beforehand, transitioning it over 3 or 4 days, increasing the amount of the new thing in their diet makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big advocate of trying to keep things the same.
Yeah.
But if it's a homemade diet or a meal that you normally keep frozen, well, it's going to be less practical on the road.
Yeah.
But there are options of not just transitioning to a completely different type of food necessarily. But just be mindful of that, and again, preempt it.
Yeah. It's good if with those longer trips to know where the nearest vets are.
Yep.
Look up where the vet is along the trip and save those contacts in the phone in case of emergency.
Probably makes sense, and something you don't think of, but if you're going for a camping trip, like, where is the closest vet? What are their open hours potentially? What's the closest emergency vet situation that you might need, when it may not be necessarily easy to find if you're out of service, and you've got 3 different towns that might be the closest towns. Knowing beforehand when you haven't got mobile service, which direction you've got to head in, sort of makes sense. So, it's just peace of mind sort of stuff, but it's something that people probably don't think of.
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
What about, occasionally you'll see a dog with their head, hanging out the window.
Yep.
I mean, it's not legal to have any part of a human's body outside the car, so I've got to assume it's the same for dogs.
It's not legal to have them hanging out the window. Nothing's supposed to hang out the outside of the vehicle. It's on the side because they're a cargo essentially, so they're not supposed to be outside the vehicle, and it's dangerous potentially for those. Grasshopper in the eye at 100 kilometres an hour is bad news. Dogs really like the wind in their lips and their ears and everything else, but I've seen that ear damage can happen. I don't really know, like you see online that dogs can have their ears damaged. I don't know if that's because they flap too much or something. I'm not really sure on that.
Yeah, like getting hematomas from...
I don't know. I mean, potentially, theoretically, I suppose. But I mean, eyes, I've seen, corneal ulcers from unknown objects. And, if you're travelling on dirt roads and cars passing on dirt roads, there's obviously badness because there's lots of chipped windscreens and you don't want to see a chipped dog.
No. That's one that I see that makes me anxious. Gosh. Please don't get
dogs
hurt,
are enjoying
doggy.
it until something happens, and we're trying to stop that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, is there any other tips you want to cover before we wrap up?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to go on a road trip with the dog, I think.
Yes.
I think I might have to plan that after this.
Puppy holiday. I had a great road trip once where we moved from Darwin to Brisbane, and I was on my own. I had 4 horses, 2 cats, 2 dogs, a sheep. I think that was it. That was an awesome road trip, but that was one of the dogs that didn't like not peeing at home, and it took him till the end of the first day to actually have a wee in the middle of nowhere.
Oh gosh, that's hard.
So yes, being organised helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did the sheep go?
Sheep was on the back of the ute
Nice.
cage.
I put mine in the horse float.
Yeah, the horses, there's 4 horses in the horse float. So, yeah, it was an interesting trip.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Glenn's Travelling Zoo.
It was.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you have a great road trip with your dogs. Tag us in doggy road trip photos. That'll be fun.
Awesome.
I want to see where you guys are up to. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.